I'm here to continue the afternoon session. I'm Robin, and now I introduce to Dr.A. Swaminathan. He is presently a registrar of Teachers Recruitment Board, a renowned professor of history, and an author of many books. He is a close associate of Madras Educational Trust.
Thank you very much, Ms. Robin. At the outset, I express my sincere thanks to the Madras Educational Trust. Secondly, and it is a remarkable day, not only to our Tamil country, but also throughout the world. I think this is the second function after the UNO celebration as in the whole world. And we are also proud to say that we are conducting it on behalf of the Madras Educational Trust with the inspiration of Mr. V.r.s.sampath, a history student of Presidency College. Thank you. From the early days of his education, I know that he inspired the youngsters and also his co-colleague to participate in various functions, and it would be all of a sudden. And he was not a secretary while he was studying in the third BA history. All of a sudden, he invited one IAS officer and conducted the meeting within half an hour. He went to the secretary and fixed him and brought him in a car and conducted the function. The secretary, who was for the past 1 year waiting for conducting the function, became meaningless. So he was silent, and then the function was not conducted. So in such a way, he conducted this function, and with great enthusiasm, all the scholars who attended in the morning session also remained here, and it is also remarkable on this day. And coming to this occasion, I must be thankful to the organizers for organizing this 50th year of celebration. From the morning, I was just watching the talk of various scholars, politicians, other people. But what I want to speak was completely exhausted by these people. Because one person was talking about the 50th year of survival. Another person was talking about Korea. Another person was talking about the economic problem. Another person was about cultural and UNICEF. So likewise, the various specialized agencies were touched by these people, and they spoke well, and then all the people applauded about the organization in a nice manner. And regarding this, being a historian and taught more than 20 years of service in history, I was just boring to talk about the First World War, afterwards then how the League of Nations was formed, and then UNO was for Second World War, UNO was formed. Likewise, Nazism, fascism, I was just talking for the long time. So I want to have a change to give an idea about the survival, how this United Nations survived after 50 years of its service. This long service, we can say, it was not the beginning of 1945, the UNO organization was formed. If you look into the history of the ancient period or medieval period or in the modern period, we can see a number of battles took place. Number of wars were waged against various rulers. Either in the ancient period or in the medieval period, all the time they formed alliance. Like the modern political alliance among the various political parties at the time of frequent changes, they formed various kinds of alliances and waged wars and then finally concluded peace. So it was put an end during the time of Napoleon period. So Napoleon became a terror to all the European countries, and he was also terror to the other Asian countries. So finally they decided and put an end to the wars by the Waterloo. So afterwards the Vienna settlement was formed. This was the beginning, as to my knowledge, this was the beginning of the UNO. The Vienna was formed with the conclusion of 4 or 5 blocks joined together. Afterwards, once again they started a conflict among the nations. This quadruple alliance was formed, and it became quintuple alliance. And it was also only a short period. once again dispute started among these powerful blocs. And likewise, this was going on after unification of Germany, after unification of Italy. Once again, they started a conflict among the European countries. And it led to the outbreak of the First World War. And during the time of the First World War, in 1914, and it existed and it continued up to 1919, this long prolonged 5 years of war, thousands of people were murdered. Most of the people lost their parents or children. Many people led homeless. So this pitiable condition existed for a long period, and due to the intervention of the powerful bloc, America, and at America, the beginning stage was not a participant of the First World War. When America was, that is when America was hurted, then having no other way, America interfered in the war, and then the war came to an end. And finally, a peace settlement was formed. And these nations joined together, and the League of Nations was formed. And this League of Nations was the second step of the United Nations organization. In this League of Nations, all the nations joined together, and all these nations only joined together only in the transient period, only temporarily joined together. They had many aims and motives, and then approaches and other achievements. But all of a sudden, Germany was not a member in the beginning, but Germany was invited to become a participant. But afterwards, once again, Germany was withdrawn. And once again, Japan was invited. And later, due to personal ambition, Japan once again withdrew from the League. So likewise, if we look into the history of the United Nations organizations, the League of Nations was the second step. And coming to the third stage, having no other way, all the victors joined together and then formed the United Nations organizations in 1945. And before that, even during the time of the Second World War, many nations or the victors joined together frequently, and they wanted to make some kind of a peace settlement in Europe as well as in other Asian countries. And on this stage, in August 1941, the United States and Great Britain, these two great powerful democratic blocs, signed the Atlantic Charter, stating broad principles for maintaining peace and assuring human rights. This is the beginning stage, maintaining peace and assuring human rights. Assuring human rights involved so many things in the post-war period. The term United Nations first was used in January 1st, 1942, when 26 countries at war with the Axis reaffirmed the principles of the Atlantic Charter. The second stage was the Atlantic Charter, and signed the Declaration of the United Nations. And then the third stage, Russia was invited. In the Moscow Declaration of 1943, the United States, the Soviet Union, Britain, and China agreed to set up a new international organization to replace the League of Nations, which had been formed after the First World War. So the League of Nations was failed, but at the same time, the nations of the League only made it a failure. The League of Nations was not a failure one, but the nations which were members in the League made it a failure. Because in the League of Nations, if you look into the principles of the League of Nations, there are many loopholes, and in which I can point out one or two things. At a summit meeting at Yalta in February 1945, it is stated that financial difficulties was the main cause for the failure of the League of Nations. So there was no financial support from these, that is in the League of Nations. So it was a failure. And for the survival of this United Nations organization was, there is a sound financial position. Here, USA is the major shareholder of this United Nations organization. So there is enough money here, and it survived for a long period. And the second stage, we can say, the rift between East and West, After the end of the Second World War, there are two blocs emerged, one democratic and communist bloc. And here we can say the rift between East and West hampered the work of the United Nations organizations. Often, when outvoted, Russia used its veto power, and many countries changed Russia with abusing privilege. So when communists gained control of China in 1949, Russia demanded the communist government be given China's United Nations seat, which was held by the nationalist Chinese, who occupied Taiwan, which is a very tiny country, and it was given importance because of the influence of United States of America. The demand was rejected, and the Russian delegation walked out of the Security Council, staying out of year. So more than 6 months it was not participating in any one of the functions. So this was one of the reasons, once again I point out, one of the reasons for the failure of the League of Nations was the similar status given to the members. So if a member who is a member of the League of Nations, they can withdraw from the membership, provided if they are not willing to be a member. And if they are willing to join once again, they can be joined. But this is not the case in the United Nations organization. Russia was more than 6 months away from this union, that is organization, but when having no other way, Russia once again joined, once again returned back. It was not actually withdrawn. So big powers, according to their convenience and adjustment, they joined the League and withdrew from the League. In sometimes they rejoined the League of Nations. Similar incidents took place in the United Nations. So similarly, there are some more examples in the United Nations, but even afterwards, it is surviving for after 50 years. In 1965, Indonesia became the first nation to withdraw from the United Nations. So like Germany, who withdrew from the League of Nations, Indonesia withdrew from the League of Nations, that is the United Nations. It did so in protest against the seating of Malaysia on the Security Council. So Malaysia was given prominence in the Security Council. In 1966, however, Indonesia resumed its membership. Since we had already very experience in the League of Nations, the United Nations must be conscious to study carefully the reasons for the withdrawal and return, so that the United Nations can deeply immerse the difference of opinion and can avoid inclination to influence one particular country. So Russia would not continue for a long period by using veto power to be away from this League of United Nations organizations. Of course, United Nations is successful in its attempt to increase its membership. In course of time, it is going on increasing the membership. So this is one convenient way. By increasing this kind of membership in large scale, in course of time, the big powers demand, the big powers domination was completely curtailed. So these are all some of the means and ways for the survival of this country. And on this meeting, I want to put one or two things here before this August session. I come across on the charter, it is stated, there are many languages were used. Many languages are now in influence the United Nations organization. When the languages like Spanish, French are included in the United Nations official language, why not the world famous Tamil language should not be included as one of the official languages? And moreover, it is also a popular language throughout the world. Even when we go to America or Africa or any other countries in the world, we can see Tamilians, and Tamilians are in large scale. So comparing with the Spanish language, it is an official language in United Nations. So here we can insist on this meeting, we can pass a resolution and send a report to the United Nations and also to the central government. And in support of the central government, we can also include Hindi. Tamil and Hindi also made as the official language of the United Nations organizations. I suggest Sampath to pass a resolution in this session and send a report to United Nations Council suggesting and requesting to include Tamil as well as Hindi as official language. Thank you very much.